Oh man, fall in Alaska, gotta love it. It's a balmy 36 degrees. What I wanted to share with you today, well, it comes from Colin. 30 plus year experienced. Hold on, let me get set up here. Yeah. Let's see. Oh. There we go. Okay. Thanks for joining me today. Like I said, it's a little balmy out. 36 degrees here in Alaska is what it is, you know. So what I wanted to share with you also, before I get lost, the Portlock trip, the season changed. The water is going to be too rough, so that's going to be off for this season, maybe first thing in the spring. So I'll readdress that later on. Let's see what else. I'm going to be going out. We transferred some native allotment land from Bristol Bay area over to this area up by Denali, just south of the Denali Highway. I'm gonna go check out that lot. I'll bring you guys along with that. Anyway, so what I wanted to share with you comes from Colin, 30 plus year operator, heavy equipment operator. Has been around all the mines around the US, just doing his thing, operating. And what happened to him happened about 15 years ago. So this particular outfit he was working for had just moved their camp from one area to a different area where they're doing placer mining. And so the tank farm for fuel was approximately 1.25 miles away from their current operation and only 1/4 mile away from their former operation. So there was a transfer truck that they would use, but this transfer truck broke down. They used the fuel in it, but it being broke down, they weren't able to refill it and come down. So he would have to watch his gauge and go get fuel before he ran out, and then come back and continue his job with the loader and all that. So he was approximately 2.5 months into his contract, and there was a nice bonus for those who stuck around the whole season, and he wanted to get his bonus. And so he's a hard worker. You know, they work 12-hour days, sometimes 14-hour days, and he just loved his work. He's out in remote Alaska. It's we'll say off the Yukon River. He doesn't want this place put on blast. So it's off the Yukon River, and we'll leave it at that. So this one particular morning, he got down to his loader, and they had started an overnight shift, and the overnight shift was just running material. So what they would do is during the day, they would stockpile a bunch of extra pay dirt near the trommel, and the night crew would just slowly feed the trommel, so that way it was always in production, maximizing, you know, all that shit. Well, so Colin gets up in the morning, and the guy that he relieved didn't refill the loader. So it was red light on. He had to go 1.25 miles to fill up his loader to get his day started. Everyone else headed down to the pit. He went towards the tank farm. Now, this is in the wee hours of the morning. It was beginning of August-ish, and he gets up to the tank farm, and it's probably similar to this as far as daylight, right? So he gets there, and he just starts sputtering and out of gas, you know, out of fuel, out of diesel. So he's like, shit, good thing I just got here. So he gets out, he goes over, and he realizes, oh shit, I don't have the key to unlock the little thing to fill up. He left it in, you know, back at camp. So he's like, oh crap. Well, so he has 1.25 mile walk, well, 2.5 mile walk to go retrieve the key, come back, and so on. So he's like, oh shit. So there have been bear sightings, and smart guys, everyone had some form of protection, whether it be bear spray or a pistol or a rifle. Well, he had a .44 Magnum pistol in the cab of the loader, and he went and retrieved it for the walk. So he gets roughly a quarter mile away from the tank farm, and from the way he explained it to me, this road is an elevated high ground. It's about 6 foot elevation, you know, because they just packed in the gravel and just kept building on it, because they're running big heavy equipment on this thing. They needed it, you know, really well built. And so he says it snakes through and then cuts through a bunch of trees at about the quarter mile mark, and then once you break through the trees, then it opens back up down towards where they were doing their mining. He gets almost to that tree line, and as he's walking down the center of the road, he can hear the equipment going off in the distance, and he's like, crap, they're gonna be so pissed I'm running late. So he starts trotting, he starts jogging, and he's just about to get to the tree line, and he sees something big and dark go across the road, and immediately he's like, oh shit, bear, crap. Okay, so he slows down, he starts assessing, all right, well, that was a pretty big bear. It looked like a black bear because it was really dark. And so he's like, man, do I want to continue going and risk it, or do I want to retreat back to the loader and wait for someone to realize I'm not there and come find me? So he decides, you know what, a bear attack is not worth, I'd rather be late than attacked by a bear. And he only had 6 shots in his .44, and he didn't have any extra ammo with him, and he decides, I'll just go wait back at the loader. Someone, the foreman's bound to realize I'm not there and come look for me. So he retreats, and as he's quasi-jogging, walking fast back towards the tank farm where his loader's sitting, he hears thrashing back behind him off to his left. And he says it was getting louder and louder, and it sounded like it was almost making a beeline towards him. So being paranoid, he was like, starts screaming, hey, bear, 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 and lets a shot fly. Boom, just up in the air. That happens, it goes dead quiet. He's got a ringing in his ear now, and he decides, I'm gonna book it to the loader. Now, Colin admits he was a little heavier around the midsection than he had liked to been because of the years of sitting in a loader and just, you know, not really getting all that much exercise. He's just exercising his arms with the levers on the loader and not much else. So he's winded pretty quick, according to what he was saying. So as he gets back to the loader, he's looking back because the sounds continued a few moments later. After he made it about another 50 yards, he heard the movement continue. So now that they're out more in the open and it's just brush, brush similar to what's around me here, he was noticing movement, but he couldn't, it was always so fast he couldn't make it out. And so he said that once he got back to the loader, which was quite an ordeal because he was out of breath, just out of shape. It sucked, life sucked at that moment for him. So he gets into the loader and he's sitting there. And he doesn't know what to do. He's just got to wait and hope that when the foreman finds out he's missing and taking too long, that he comes and looks for him. So as he's sitting there, he's looking out the windows of this loader, and he's got a little higher elevation there, and he sees this black thing stand up, and he's thrown off because he thinks it's a black bear trying to put eyes on him and just standing up at a distance. But this thing turns and is walking from his left to his right at about 50 yards out and clears the brush and just out in the open. And then he realizes what he's looking at. He's looking at a Sasquatch, a hairy man. And immediately he said he was shaking uncontrollably in the cab of that loader. He said it wasn't acting aggressive. It was just, he saw it and it was moving. So it crosses his field of view, and back behind the tank farm, there's another batch of trees. Now, there's 3 tanks on this tank farm, 2 laying down on the ground, and then 1 vertical tank. The vertical tank had a ladder on it, and it was the tank that everyone drew from to load up their heavy equipment. There was a hose that came from it up to like a little, what you would call it, a register or a pump station. So he watches this thing, and it crosses and goes into the trees back behind the tank, and he doesn't know what to do. There's a handheld radio in the cab of that loader, but no one ever uses them, so the batteries were dead. He tried turning it on, he tried looking for spare batteries, nothing, dead. Great idea, but unless you keep up on it, it's just useless. So anyway, he sits there and he's 20 minutes passes or so, and he's Mother Nature's calling, and he's got a tinkle. So he's looking all around, no sign, no nothing, doesn't hear nothing, opens the little door, climbs out, gets on the ground, starts relieving himself on the tire. As he's doing so, he hears this low grumbling, like growl kind of sound, and he said it sounded like it was on the other side of his loader. And immediately he freaks out. He's stumbling around. He tinkled on himself a little bit trying to get re-zipped. He left the pistol up in this little cab of the loader. As he's trying to get up into the loader, he slipped, banged his knee, hurt it. He gets up in there, grabs a pistol, comes out. He wants to chase this thing off. He doesn't want to he felt like he was stuck, right? So this poor guy, he's about a half hour into this whole ordeal from getting back from his little attempted walk. About a half hour, 40 minutes in this loader and the tinkling situation. So he's looking around, he sees nothing. From what he was saying, he kind of walked around to where he thought the noise was coming from, and there was nothing. He couldn't see nothing. He's looking off into the brush. He sees absolutely nothing. And so he turns around and looks back at the tank. And from the tank, the vertical tank to the two laying down, he sees something move. However, his vantage point, he couldn't fully make it out because the trees were dark behind this thing, and he couldn't make out a full silhouette. He just saw two legs. Moves over to the two other tanks. So he immediately climbs back up into the loader, shuts the door, and he's sitting there. And he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't have enough fuel to go anywhere. He was sputtering out. He knows that if he runs it dry, he's gonna have problems restarting it and some other things. There's issues with this particular loader because out there in the field, they run these things to death. They will beat the ever-living shit out of them. Parts are few and far between. So he didn't want to risk any further kind of issues running the gear down. So he's sitting there and he's kind of watching over. He's trying not to pay attention. And so he opens one of the slide windows and starts smoking a cigarette to calm down. He's drinking coffee out of his thermos. He's trying to separate himself from what's going on around him. And he starts hearing weird noises, like squirrel chatter, different types of imitations of ravens and other stuff. And he knew right where it was coming from. It was coming from back behind him off to his right by those two laying down tanks. So he's just ignoring it, right? So he's smoking a cigarette, drinking his coffee out of his thermos, and they have big mirrors off to the side, okay? And so as he's ignoring this and whatnot, after a few minutes, he notices something dark in his mirror going behind his rig. Immediately, he flings the cigarette out, shuts the window. He's sets the thermos down. He's got his pistol. He's sitting up on his knees in the chair, looking back behind, looking at this thing. Where is this thing, right? So as he's watching, looking around or whatever, he notices it by the tire, between the tire and the body of the loader, like literally just below him, looking up at him. Squatted down, looking up at him, just giving him this real inquisitive look. He said he didn't feel it was aggressive. He felt it was very, very curious. And he starts yelling, "Get out of here, get out of here, I'll shoot you, right? This thing stands up and is almost eye level with him, and about 4 feet from him, just outside the cab of this loader. He didn't know what to do. He froze up, he was stuck. And this thing started showing its teeth at him because he's holding a gun. He's not pointing it directly, but he's holding this gun. And it's showing its teeth at him. And he said at one point it smacked the side of the loader, and that's when it got aggressive. Gun in hand. 20/20 hindsight, he said it was more than likely because of the gun in hand. It didn't get aggressive until it saw the gun And, you know, then that's when its whole demeanor changed. Smacked the side of the loader, started pushing on it a little bit, and started maneuvering like it was going to come and tear him out of that little cab. So immediately he's freaking out. He slides that window open and he shoots 3 times out the window. Bam, bam, bam. Right? This thing takes off just directly straight away from him, away from the tanks and everything. Takes off running. Like basically back down, kind of the road went off towards his left a little bit. This thing just went straight away and was kind of canting away from the road. And he immediately started shaking. He was like, I feel trapped in here. So what he does is he gets out, brings his thermos, and goes and climbs up that tank, the tall vertical one. It's about 20 foot off the ground or so. And one of the attributes of this thing is it has a fold down ladder with this little draw thing. So you could climb up it and pull the ladder. The bottom of the ladder will swing up and click into place on this little click thing. So he does. It took everything he had to get up there because he was shaking so hard. He was so nervous. He makes it up there, pulls up the ladder, and he sits there. And he's looking down the road hoping someone comes, because now he's shot 4 of his 6 bullets. He has 2 left. So he's sitting there and sitting there. It's quiet. He's hearing movement, but every time he gets up to look for it, he's moving a little too slow to see what's moving around him. He said about almost an hour gone by from it standing up, smacking the loader, to him getting up to the top of the tank before he heard a side-by-side coming from camp. And he knew it was his foreman's, and he knew rescue was on its way. Someone's on their way. So he's sitting up on top of this tank. He can't see the movement he's hearing. All he can do is hear it. The foreman comes down the road, and as the foreman gets closer, the foreman stops about almost 100 yards out and starts waving. He could see Colin on the top of the tank, and he's waving at him, hey, hey, and he's pointing, and he can't make out what his foreman is trying to say. But his foreman's pointing off to the side of the tank, and you know, Colin starts looking. He can't see shit. And so the foreman's pointing, gets back in the side-by-side and leaves. Starts hauling ass back towards camp. And so Colin's like, oh, fuck, great. You know, great. Well, unbeknownst to him, the foreman didn't bring his rifle. And he went to retrieve it, because what Colin found out later, okay, I'll get to that in a minute. So foreman comes back about 15, 20 minutes later, hauling ass down the road, gets a lot closer this time, just back behind the loader, and stops and hops out, and he's pointing his rifle off to the side of the tank, right? And Colin's looking down at his foreman, and his foreman's pointing off to his right-hand side, but he's up on this big tank. He can't see shit. And he says, the foreman's yelling, get out of here, yeah, yeah, and then fires around, and he hears movement thrashing off towards the trees back behind this tank farm. And the foreman starts yelling at Colin, get your ass down here, hurry up, get down here, get down here. So Colin has to climb down as quickly as he can. He left his thermos up there, has to climb down, hit this little click thing that drops the lower part of the ladder, not get tangled up in the little pull string, and then climbs down. They get in the side-by-side, and they're both looking back, and he hands Colin the rifle and says, look out, it was right over there. And Colin asks him, did you see what I saw? He goes, all I saw was the biggest fucking black bear I've ever seen in my life, and it was standing up looking at me. I shot over its head, it dropped down on all 4s again and ran off. So his foreman only saw what he wanted to see, basically, because Colin said there was no mistaking when he saw this thing, and it was a lot lighter at that time when his foreman came. There was no mistaking what he saw. He thinks his foreman was just that separation. It was a black bear. It was big as shit. Let's go. So Colin's holding the rifle. They turn around and start heading back towards camp. And Colin's like, well, hey, I got to fill up the loader, you know, work this, that. And he goes, no, we're going to go get a couple more of the guys, and we're going to go make sure that bear is run off. They get back to camp. One of the guys that worked with them, a real old timer, he was one of their mechanics, on-site mechanics. They were telling everyone what had happened, and Colin's shaking still. His foreman is shaking. So obviously the guys there initially kind of chuckled, but then it dawned on them, oh crap, these guys are fucking freaking out. The old timer tells him, do not go, do not go. We can go up, retrieve the loader, everyone get back to work. Do not chase this thing, do not follow it. And commences to telling him what an old native told him about the area, to not chase him into the woods, don't follow him. And they kept asking, well, what's them? And he said, the hairy man, you know, Sasquatch. And everyone's just kind of like, what? And this old timer was dead serious, and everyone else there was just kind of like, okay, we don't get it, but we'll. And of course Colin understood, because he looked at this thing, you know what I mean? He stared at it, and then it smacked his loader. So Colin was very clear on what the old man was talking about, very clear. And so everyone calms down, and Colin said that they were the next season was going to be the next move that they made, as far as where they were going to be mining or whatever. So they're about 3 weeks shy of shutting everything down, and production went to a crawl, because once everything settled down later on that morning, midday, everyone kind of took off until lunch and just hung around camp and was just kind of like talking to each other, freaking out. Colin said that at midday, when everyone was getting ready to fire back up, they kept hearing noises just off in the trees, and rocks started hitting their base camp little structure, little ATCOs. Everyone stayed inside after that for about 3 days, and then everything went quiet again, and then they forced themselves to pick up production. He ended up making his bonus, everyone did, but what happened in that short, brief few days of just utter, basically, lockdown and freaking out, everyone kept to themselves, because the owner of the mine would have fired all of them for not continuing production. So they kind of all just kind of agreed that, hey, this is beyond the scope of our job, we need to be safe, and they left it at that. Colin, after the end of that season, this was again about 15 years ago, off the Yukon River, he quit that job. He hasn't been back to Alaska. He's currently working in a mining outfit down lower 48. Much happier there. He loves it up here, but he just can't reconcile what happened to him at the loader and just remote Alaska for any period of time. He can see pictures of it just fine, but he knows within himself that if he was up here, he would not be able to focus on his work, because he freely admits after that stretch where everyone stayed in camp, he was hyper vigilant. His production went to shit because he could not focus on what he was constantly looking for the next rock to be thrown, the next scream, because over the course of the day, these couple days where everything laid low, there was screaming, there was rock throwing, there was all sorts of stuff going on that was freaking everyone out, you know, and they didn't know what to do. You know, no one got a clear shot on this thing, and there was multiple sightings of this thing, you know, during those few days until it went quiet. So I want to thank Colin for sharing. I couldn't imagine what it felt like sitting up on that tank farm. I don't laugh because it's funny. I laugh because it's like, holy shit. Can you put yourself in his feet? Jeez. Are looking right at it, and it smacks the loader you're in. And that's another thing. He said when it smacked and pushed the loader, he said he felt like it could tip it over. He said when it pushed on it, it wasn't straining to do it. It looked effortless the way it was shaking it. So anyway, I want to thank Colin. I appreciate you being patient, especially with the stuff going on in the background. I've been busy for days dealing with native allotment land stuff and, you know, some other family related stuff. So I want to thank Colin for being patient. I record later on today with Bigfoot Society. As soon as I am done with that interview with him, I will let everyone know when that'll be airing or whatever, or where you can find it. And again, thanks Colin, and thank you guys for joining me, and we'll catch you on the next one.